Welcome to All Set for Sunday podcast for busy and distracted Catholics to be a little more prepared for Sunday Mass. My name is Scott Williams. My co-host is Jeff Traylor. How are you, Jeff?
I'm great, Scott.
And Father Christian Raab.
Hello.
From Southern Indiana joining us today.
Oh, good old Father Crab.
Always good to be here.
What was your high school nickname?
Moose.
Moose.
Moo. Did they moo it? Moose.
I was a big toddler, and so that nickname was from my I can't believe I'm saying this on national broadcasting. But I was a very large toddler, and so my family gave me that nickname, but it was known by all my friends, and so that kind of people who I'd been in school with since first grade still, that just continued.
That's so great.
My brother-in-law's nickname is Moose also, but his last name is Helmuth. And so people just shrunk it down to Muth and then Moose. But it's like they're saying Moose, but not with a lisp. Moose.
It's a good nickname. I mean,
yeah,
I like being outside. So do Moose.
Better than if they had just stuck with Big Toddler.
Exactly.
And now you really like to pray, so it's Oremus.
Oremus. Wow. That is a really spectacular.
Good work.
That
was good.
Doesn't get better than that. 2-minute drill.
All right. It's for sure not going to get better here. 31st Sunday in Ordinary Time. We start off with a reading from Malachi. And the Lord is speaking here and talking, and I don't know, I got a little lost in what's going on here, but I think he is making it clear to these, to the people that he is speaking to, that he's the priest, that's his audience here, that essentially like their job is to give him glory and to worship him, and he should be the only father. And if not, we for sure get Old Testament God here. He's going to send out a curse. He is going to void the covenant of Levi. He's just really going to bust heads here, making it very clear that if they break from this relationship, they break from this promise, then they're breaking the covenant of their fathers and they're violating this thing. The response of the psalm then, in you, Lord, I have found my peace. It's nothing. It's not really a mumbler. Like, I think people remember it, but like there's nothing to just really get me.
You know what's going to trip people up on that psalm?
Ooh.
There's no "Oh Lord."
In you, oh Lord.
Yeah. It's
Did
just
I say oh?
No, but there's going to be people saying "In you, oh Lord."
In you, oh Lord.
And the other half is going to be saying "In you, Lord."
In you, oh Lord, I found my peace.
I'm just saying, this weekend, half the parish will be doing one thing and half the parish will be doing the other.
Oh Lord or Lord?
Nice.
I can't wait to hear your survey afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, how many thought it was oh Lord? That's your whole homily this week. All right. The second reading then is as I was reading the second readings from First Thessalonians, I was getting very lovey-dovey vibes in here. And then I wrote lovey-dovey all the time, which I thought Father Christian would get my reference. Do you? You got to make the noise then.
Well, it's kind of like, that's a little.
Wow.
Yeah, that's more like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okie dokie.
You don't get it? Lovey-dovey, lovey-dovey, lovey-dovey all the time.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that song before.
Well, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
False.
Or
Steve Miller Band.
Oh, Steve Miller Band. That's my bad.
It's okay. Let's keep going.
That's embarrassing. Let's delete this. Can we edit?
Yeah, we'll just edit this out.
Got it. Thanks.
Make a note that at 4 minutes and 27 seconds, we'll edit that out.
Yeah. Thanks, Emily.
It's not happening.
She's going to come to us later and be like, do I have to edit that? Anyway, in this, Paul is speaking to, Paul and his crew are speaking to the Thessalonians, and they're talking about how they treated them gently. They were gentle. They were like a nursing mother caring for them. They showed the affection. They were there to share their hearts and to take care of them. In that they work night and day, not to burden them, but to just bring the Lord to them. And because of this, they give them thanks and show this unceasing love that God has brought to them. Amen. I don't know. I was these readings. We've had some really clear readings last week, and then I was a little lost today. It may just be my brain, but our gospel reading then. The gospel comes from Matthew 23, 1-12. Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, "The scribes and Pharisees have taken their seat on the chair of Moses. Therefore, do and observe all the things whatsoever they tell you. But do not follow their example, for they preach, but they do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens hard to carry and lay them on people's shoulders, but they will not lift a finger to move them. All their works are performed to be seen. They widen their phylacteries, and lengthen their tassels. They love places of honor at banquets, seats of honor in synagogues, greetings in marketplaces, and the salutation, Rabbi. As for you, do not be called Rabbi. You have but one teacher. You are all brothers. Call no one on earth your father. You have but one Father in heaven. Do not be called Master. You have but one Master, the Christ. The greatest among you must be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, but whoever humbles himself will be exalted."
All right. So, Father Christian, how wide should our phylacteries be?
I don't know, honestly.
I feel like I want to apologize. Like, that might be my worst two.
One cubit,
1 cubit,
2 cubits,
70 times 7 phylacteries.
I have no idea.
All right.
How much are you going to focus on phylacteries?
None, not at all. Not at all. Nothing.
Other than pronouncing that word, what else did I get wrong here?
It was I can't think of anything specific that you got wrong.
It was just mid.
I tuned out and cannot remember anything.
I can't think of one thing.
So many. Oh goodness. All right. What are you preaching on this weekend?
I'm going to talk, I think, about I feel like these readings are all about bad religious leadership. And so, I mean, the first reading, he's talking Malachi. I mean, he says that, he's talking to the priests. And their problem is that they're not glorifying God. When you get to the gospel, Jesus, this is one of the times that he's really going after the religious leaders of his time, the Pharisees. And they have a few different things that Jesus is not happy with them about. One is that they are really laying burdens upon the people. And who knows? I don't know exactly what he's referring to here, but I think this comes up more than once, and just that Jesus really feels that the Pharisees of his time they raise a lot of anxiety by the way they interpret the law, and Jesus is criticizing them for that, the way they increase people's burdens. And interestingly, right, when you look at the letter of St. Paul, one of the first things he says is that I'm not here to increase your burdens, So the problem that Jesus is pointing out is leaders who increase people's burdens, raise people's anxieties. None of they seem to be out for their own vainglory. They're not pointing to God. Paul's the opposite. He came to deliver the gospel. So he's not here to increase burdens, but he's here to deliver the good news. And then, of course, the overarching problem for the Pharisees is that their interior and their exterior don't match. So they do a lot of good things, but they're doing them for vainglory, and that they are not, in fact, internally attuned to God or even focused on God. They're focused on other things. So I think you kind of get these three problems, I would say, of hypocrisy, vainglory, and increasing other people's burdens. And so that is what when I look at the readings, that's what strikes me about them. But it is interesting because I feel like the readings are really pointed at the religious leaders. And so then it's like, well, what do you say to the people in the pew about these readings?
Hmm.
And I think you could go a couple directions. I mean, one is just to recognize that, we all have, you might say, a religious leader inside of ourselves. And so I think we can ask, why are we doing the things we're doing? Why are we even doing the Christian thing? What is our motivation? And is it to point to ourselves? Is it to draw attention to ourselves? Is it out of scrupulosity or anxiety? Is it or is it for some other reason? And if we were to go back, of course, just 1 week ago to the readings, the gospel from this previous Sunday was love God, love neighbor. And so I think you get a nice contrast between what is the true motivation for religious observance, and then what is the false. And the false is anxiety, hypocrisy, vainglory. The true motivation, of course, is love of God, love of neighbor. So I think that's what I probably focus on. Yeah, unless I really get an inspiration and want want to talk maybe also in the context of the homily just about this tragedy and sadness of poor religious leadership, and that that is something that as Catholics we live with. And how can we live with that? How do we maintain our faith? How do we maintain our hope? And that's something I may also bring into my homily. Yeah.
Never an easy one.
No, it's a terribly difficult one. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but one that needs to be, that if we don't talk about it within the proper
Mhm.
perspective, if we don't hear it spoken about from the pulpit, then it's going to be talked about elsewhere.
Sure.
False
Sure.
narrative, or
Yeah.
spins on it.
Very true point. Yeah.
So it is hard, but I put it right there with like having to ask for tithing. Like, it's not easy, but
Yeah.
it does need to happen.
It needs to happen.
Yeah. I'm not saying you should do that, but
well, it's what I think Jesus is attacking here is the same thing that we hear a lot from Pope Francis, which is it's really against clericalism, and clericalism is so toxic and disruptive for the church. It really is. And I think the person who's out for vainglory, the person who's out for who is a hypocritical person, we kind of we know what that's all about. I am kind of intrigued by this concern that you see here in the gospel about the person who's out to increase other people's burdens. And I think that's something we don't honestly hear enough about. That religious leadership can not focus enough on the good news, and but of course, in that, then part of that good news is both also a living testimony, how you live, but that instead of really giving people good news, you increase their burden. You make the homily every week is about making people feel anxious, as if their level of anxiety is going to be a good way, is going to be an effective motivation for them to actually, change the way of their life, but it doesn't work.
What's an example of what you're talking about?
Oh, you don't want me to get specific.
that's not true. That's why he asked.
Well, I think sometimes people make up rules that aren't there. And to me, that is an example of increasing people's anxieties. So if Father has a particular liturgical preference, and tells everybody that this is what the church teaches, this is what you need to do, uh, this is what it means to be Catholic. But in actuality, what he's giving you is a preference. It's not actually what the church teaches. It's just something that he has come to a personal conviction about. To me, that's increasing people's anxieties, because now you're giving them a rule that doesn't in fact exist, and now people are going to be worried about fulfilling that rule.
Where does the line, like, between being a parish community and like praying as a community versus the way that I want to pray, like the personal devotion within a liturgical sense, or does the meaning of liturgy mean community in tandem?
Do I know exactly what you're asking?
I don't know. Maybe that was too broad of a question.
I think you're saying, at what point do we balance like our own personal preference and style of prayer, especially within community worship, versus is that what you're saying?
Versus somewhat. Like,
I think, I mean, the pastor obviously has an obligation to try to create unity, and in the context of liturgy, like things like unity of posture actually do matter. But I think it's important that a person communicate what he's asking for in the right way, so that he can say, here's the value that's underlying this, and here's why I as pastor would like for us to do it this way. But I can't, if in fact this is not a rule, one should not present things as requirements that are not in fact requirements.
Gotcha.
Our abbot used to say, don't be holier than the church. And I think
that's a great statement. That one hits in the
gut. So I'm for that. I'm for not, I think it's good to you can challenge people to go above and beyond, but you shouldn't present it things that are as obligations or requirements that are not in fact.
I think that, we've been talking a lot. You're an avid listener of the show, so you've heard, but we've been asking priests like their advice for, new priests. But I think this is kind of a good example of that, is like, as people change assignments and end up in a place. And I think oftentimes there can be this tumultuous, you come in after somebody who has taken their own personal preference and made that the standard. And then if a priest comes in and says, well, no, we're going to do this instead, and gets looked at as the bad guy, maybe, or how do you do that without making your predecessor look bad by saying, but I think what you were just describing there makes sense, to be open and honest and just say, like, my role is to celebrate the Eucharist, and this is the best way for me to do this, and some of the preferences I have, but I want to do this so I can celebrate in the most pure way for you. I've heard priests say that before, even using that as kind of an explanation. Like, they've said that with like a piece of the celebration of the liturgy that they're doing that, like, I don't necessarily agree with. Like, when I was at Roncalli, we had a priest who would ask everybody to stand or to sit during the consecration. We didn't have kneelers, right? But typically we would stand, but this person would ask everyone to sit. It was strange. It was the strangest thing to me. But he explained to everybody, like, it's distracting to me when you're standing, and I need all of my focus to be here and doing this. So anyway, I thought of that as an example, but I think I always appreciate when a priest will say, well, here's why I'm doing this, and not why I'm doing it because it's the right way. And it's
I think, to me, it's all in sort of the reason you give people better be true. Like, don't say something's a requirement that isn't. You can say, I think this is a good idea, or I think this, is something I would like for us as a community to do together, but don't start putting forward things as if they are in the general instruction of the Roman Missal or the Code of Canon Law.
It's called the germ. Our listeners know, don't worry.
Oh, I know. Your listeners know how well I am familiar with that book too. Which is, I might be the least familiar of everybody here. I don't know that you have
probably more than me.
but the point is, don't sort of put things forward as if they are in those things and they're not, you know.
Yeah.
Or if, let's say you have a very favorite devotion, and so you start saying, hey, everybody, you need to do this, to the church, to your parish. Well, no, you don't. That's a private devotion, Father. You can't tell everybody in your parish that they need to share that private devotion.
Yeah, it's one thing to invite people,
Yeah, sure.
another to make it feel as if it's a requirement. But
Yeah.
Going back to the first part of what you said you were going to preach on for the gospel, those three things that primarily are focused on religious leadership. Then you mentioned that we can look to the pew, and what does that mean? Other than just being aware that those might be traps, what can we do to guard ourselves from falling into those traps? The people at home, not the religious people.
Yeah. I think centering yourself again in love, in last week's gospel, that we center ourselves there through our prayer, the practice, the theological virtues. I love.
Sorry. He had some trouble with his pen.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna help him. Sorry.
I was fine.
The theological virtues, centering ourselves in the theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity, are where we want to continue to return. So, and there's a great and venerable tradition in the church of making acts of faith or acts of hope or acts of charity. I think that's really good. When you do that, you actually allow those things to increase. So the Lord loves to reward our exercise of virtue by increasing it. So if we practice acts of charity, our charity will increase. If we practice acts of faith and acts of hope, they will increase. So I think that's what I would say is getting ourselves centered in those things rather than in vainglory. I'm doing this for attention, hypocrisy or anxiety and fear, not living out of anxiety and fear. Yeah.
Grace builds virtue.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We ready for some dumb questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you listen last week, Father?
Don't think I did.
Okay. We've got a good question for you.
Okay.
I'll let you ask that one. I had a dumb question written down from last week that we didn't even get to.
Okay.
Man, did it go off the rails last week?
Yeah.
Oh, who was on it? Who was on your show?
Father James.
Yeah. And it wasn't because of him. It was the scripture.
It does always end up being Father James.
Yeah. Well, I just want to know who it was so I can go back and listen. It's easiest to find.
You'll enjoy it. It was really, we laughed a lot. I think we learned some things. Anyway.
All right. Well, let's see if we go.
Number one, you don't want to be the Bishop of Orlando.
Let's go even further off the rails.
Yeah, great. This one is more of a real question. Let me start with what you said, the word scrupulosities.
Did I?
Yeah. What is that? Okay. What's that word mean? It's just me being dumb. Like, I think I can figure it out, but I was like, oh, he just said that real casually.
Right. So scrupulosity is what happens when our conscience, it's actually it's a disorder of the conscience. So inside,
further away.
What?
We're getting further away from me understanding.
Are we?
Disorder of the conscience.
You don't know what a conscience is?
Never had one.
It's when our conscience is constantly accusing us of not being good enough and not doing things good enough. And so
I've got one of those. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So when we're living out of scrupulosity, we're really living out of a kind of internal perfectionism rather than the freedom that the gospel brings.
Okay, that's really good. Thank you. I'm glad I asked that because I did not. I thought I had figured it. I did not. That was a way better. Man, I feel like I need to take that one. All right. Next question. I don't think we've ever talked about this on the podcast, but break. Somebody is a communion minister.
You sound like me right now, not
Yeah.
not getting your words out.
I'm trying to just figure out how to say that. I wrote down breaking hosts.
Okay.
Like, can we talk about this? Like when we were talking last week, it came up last week because we were talking about NCYC mass and how many hosts you have to make sure that, but like when I feel like I grew up in an era where like if the community minister started to run out of hosts, they just looked back and did the math and they're like, well, I just need to divide these in 4. And they would just sit there and crack hosts. But I've since learned you should not do that.
Why?
But what I was taught or learned is that like by breaking the host, like you're risking like crumbs of Jesus. Like when you break it, then there's crumbs places and it falls which is why like oftentimes when the priest is handling the host, they don't pull their fingers apart because there may be crumbs in there until they wash their hands. These might be some of those things we were just talking about here, Father.
Rules that don't exist.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm curious. I'd like your thoughts.
So if you're running low on hosts, you can break hosts.
Okay. Even an extraordinary minister.
Even there's no difference between a priest and anybody else in terms of whether or not you can break the host.
You should have just left it.
So
that quote out there.
Oh yeah, I would love to see.
Raab, there's no difference between a priest and everybody else.
That's what we're gonna put the snippet on the
direct
this week on.
I'll lose my job teaching theology in a seminary. No, when it comes to distributing communion, the hosts obviously, yes, it's a nice thing if you count right and you're able to give everybody a host and not have to break them. And one of the reasons would be because you don't want the risk of crumbs and things like that.
Okay.
But there's no rule against breaking the host. Therefore, it seems to me like maybe a little misleading to say you should not break the host.
I think the implication of it was like pause and go see if there are more hosts somewhere else.
Okay.
Before making the choice.
That sounds
to just start snapping hosts.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Yeah.
The whole idea of like speed is not our focus here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sure.
Yeah.
It's not ideal that you have to break hosts. Yeah.
Okay. That was good. Thank you. Next dumb question that I have.
Okay.
So it seems like as the priest celebrating mass, celebrant of the mass, you have a lot of control over like the speed at which mass can take place. Correct? So what are those factors that you can like do you make a conscious decision ever where you walk in, you're like, I got to get out of here by this time? Like what are the main levers you can pull to fast forward a mass?
I think it's funny that you're asking me this question because I really do think about this. And
I would imagine this popped into my head and I was like, I would imagine a lot of priests think about this.
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure that everybody does. But I've been in a couple places where it was really necessary. Like when I lived in Washington, D.C., we would have daily mass at the National Shrine, and it would be every half hour.
Which national shrine?
The Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception.
Got it.
Scott gets I don't even want to.
There's lots of national shrines.
Okay.
But the people at that one like to say the
National Shrine. I love it. Okay.
And so Scott always asks
which one
for clarification.
Yeah. Okay. So to answer your question, when you're crunched for time, Eucharistic prayer too. That's always first decision you're gonna have to make. This is the shortest one. Singing will always extend, so you can cut down the singing.
You ever sing faster than you can talk? Hard no?
opposite. So singing will always extend the
Even with a
mass.
quick tempo. Okay, never
Well,
mind.
so say it's a Sunday mass though, and there's already music. Do you just mean like you're starting your procession quick and you're cutting them off after one verse? And
No, because even as priest, you could decide to sing certain things that you might
parts of the
opt
mass
out
got
of,
it.
right? So like the Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy at the beginning, or at the beginning of the Eucharistic prayer, the Lord be with you. If you make that choice, you're adding minutes. And so
You really do think about
oh
this.
yeah, definitely, for sure.
Do you ever accidentally start that and you're like, oh man, I have really made a mistake here.
Well, I'm I just think that I try to be aware of the time, particularly if there's another mass coming up. And
Okay.
so if there's one coming, I know I have choices I have to make. So and then of course the homily, that's a big one. And that's probably my biggest temptation, is to go along on the homily. And so some priests are really good at a quick homily. I'm not as good. I'm not as
What do you think
bad as some others.
what's an average homily for you?
For me,
Length
Sunday,
of time.
Sunday homily,
Mhm.
probably 8 to 10 minutes.
Hi, man.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
But also, like, do you ever account for the fact you're like, all right, I'm gonna have a long homily, so we're going EP2 and I'm not singing. And
yes, for
so
sure.
you'll balance it out.
For sure. Yeah. And I will sometimes I've cut down since I got to the parish. I used to give like 15-minute Sunday homilies, but I'm in a parish that we have our masses are actually kind of back to back. Sunday morning we have mass every hour and a half, and we have
wow,
that is tight.
Yeah, and
that's barely enough time to get the lingerers out of the
well, that's the thing is it's not just finishing in an hour. It's all the things that kind of happen right after mass and
everybody
stuff like
lines up to say hi to Father
And
Christian.
well,
hello, Father.
But you're thinking too, the people are coming in for the next mass.
Yeah.
And then a few of our masses, they do the rosary before mass. So you really want to make sure that, they have time. But okay. I feel like we haven't gotten to the big question yet.
Why?
The one that you got derailed on.
Oh,
yeah.
Can we do that? Or you got another one?
No, I'm good. I was going to ask your advice for new priests, but I like this one better. So let's.
Okay.
So, did you know that the Bishop of Orlando is like in charge of the souls on the moon? Like the moon is in the diocesan boundaries of the Diocese of Orlando.
I think I heard that one time and I'd forgotten it.
Yeah. So that's a thing. And now that like space travel is becoming more consumeristic, like say we raise some money and go to the moon, just like out of pure travel, and it happens to be over a Sunday, will you come and will you celebrate mass on the moon?
No.
What?
This is 2 weeks in a row.
2 no's?
Well,
you would deny the Eucharist?
Wait, well, hold on. I'm backtracking. Let me backtrack. I'm presuming that somebody else is available to go.
I mean, I'm asking you.
I have no desire to go to the moon.
Okay.
And I find it actually terrifying, the idea of going.
You wouldn't be the first person to celebrate mass on the moon if you had the opportunity.
I would probably have a panic attack in space, and nobody wants that.
You can do Eucharistic prayer too. It's fine.
I think I would love to celebrate and be happy for whatever priest got that opportunity. I do not need to be the one to go to the moon.
Who would you like to nominate?
To go to the moon?
This is what we're going to start doing.
I really didn't think we'd get 2 strikeouts on
I know. I want to start asking for nominations. What priest that would you like to nominate to be the first priest to celebrate mass on the moon?
To celebrate mass on the moon. Wow.
Lunar mass.
That's like a physics term. Lunar mass.
I'm gonna so mostly for comedic value.
Ooh.
My my confrere, Father Paul Nord, is like a really big guy, and I think he would look funny in a spacesuit. So I'm going to go with. He also kind of has a funny walk, so that would just be exaggerated in space, and I think that would be very amusing.
So mean. Because it would be funny looking.
Yeah, sure.
What's his name?
Father Paul Nord. He's my peer. We're the same age.
That minor.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Emily,
that was.
if you hear his name, will you look him up and email?
Oh,
me?
Emily knows who he is very well, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sure. He's a fun person too. The people who went with him on the space flight, they would have a good time with him.
All right. All right. This episode has been out of this world. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Not for Father though.
Yeah. You're stuck here.